Welcome to the AWA Market Minute, breaking down financial, political, and economic events that impact today's retirees. Our investment committee performs hours of research and market analysis every month so that we can share simple summaries with our clients in 30 minutes or less. Featuring top industry experts who share insights on important topics so that our clients can gain understanding and peace of mind on their journey to and through retirement. And now your hosts, Chief Investment Officer Scott Hoxer and Founder and CEO Paul Coles.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of the AWA Market Minute. I'm Paul Coles, and with me, as always, is our guest host, Scott Hoxer. We have a really great conversation planned for today, Scott. Let's go ahead and introduce our two additional guest hosts with us today. We've got Chad Kelly, who's another advisor here on the team, and Mason Page. Chad and Mason have been kind enough to join us today, and we're going to talk through some topics on Roth IRAs and Roth conversions, and a lot of information that is super relevant to retirees and comes up regularly in our conversations. So we thought today we'd spend some time going over that information in a little more detail. Just a quick disclaimer, we want to make sure that everyone understands the information we talk about today is designed for informational purposes. It's designed for a broad audience. It's designed to be educational and somewhat entertaining. It is not designed to be specific advice regarding anyone's specific, unique situation. And everyone needs to come and talk to their individual advisor regarding their specific situation before acting on anything. We'd also invite everyone to review the information with their specific tax accountant, because we are not tax accountants in our firm. We are investment advisors. And so we don't want you to act on any advice prior to first meeting with us and second meeting with your individual tax accountant. Did I get that disclosure okay, everybody?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, with that, we want to go ahead and dive in. It's a topic that I think hits a lot of emotion. I think a lot of clients are intrigued by the notion, especially around tax time, and especially this year, given a presidential election year. I think there's a lot of fear surrounding how taxes are going to play out. We know that next year we're kind of running the end of the Trump tax kind of policies, and we'll see those sunset. And so today we're going to talk through some of these tax conversations. Let me start out by drawing kind of the mechanics of what an IRA is versus what a Roth account looks like. So within a traditional IRA, we have kind of a vehicle here where we put contributions into the account, and we establish kind of some principle in those contributions, which are all pre-tax. And then that account will grow. And as that does, those gains are also growing pre-tax. So what that means is we will go ahead and take all these contributions and deduct those from our income in the year that we make those contributions into the IRA. On the backside, as we take out withdrawals, they will all come back to us 100% taxable at whatever tax rate we are having tax our income at our ordinary income tax rate. Does that look about right, everybody?
Yep.
All right, now let's contrast that with a Roth IRA. On a Roth IRA, same concept. We will put in our contributions, and those contributions will establish principal, which will be post-tax. Okay, what does that mean? That means that all these initial contributions we're not deducting in that calendar year that we make the contributions into the Roth account. They're not being deducted. They're being reported as income in that calendar year. Now, as the Roth IRA grows, those gains are tax-free. Okay? So here's what happens on the back end as we make our withdrawals. We have 100% of those withdrawals tax-free. Now, I'll put a caveat there. If we have abided by the rules of the Roth, those withdrawals are tax-free. And we'll talk through some more of those nuanced, principles today regarding, when they're not potentially tax-free. But this is kind of the concept, right? So we have on the left side here a traditional IRA, and on the right, a Roth IRA. Now, there's kind of a couple criteria to determine when these work. In this scenario over here, I would say this is more of a save now, pay later concept. Whereas over here, I'd say this is more of a pay now and save later concept. Okay, so when will each of these work? Look something like this. If we have assumptions on our tax rates, and here I'm not talking about my individual tax rates, I'm talking about the tax rates established by the federal government, and we also may have assumptions on my future income level, which would determine my personal tax. Okay, then we need to determine which product, which account would be more of an advantage. Okay, so in the first outcome, we're going to suggest tax rates stay the same and my income level stays the same. Okay, so if somehow tax rates never change, federal government keeps them flat from here on through eternity, and my income stays consistent, the advantage here is a push. Neither one would make a featherweight difference. Okay, this is interesting but true. Now, if I have an assumption that the tax rates in the future are going to go up and my income is going to go down, then the advantage would go to a Roth. In this scenario, I'm saying, hey, I believe that taxes are not going to be consistent. What's the national debt level at today?
So 34 trillion
34 trillion
with a T.
with a T. Okay, and literally 6 months ago we were looking at, what was it?
A little over 32.
32. Okay,
Yeah.
So what's $2 trillion amongst friends, right? So this debt continues to just continue to ratchet up at incredible pacing. So it's not unreasonable to make the expectation or assumption that taxes might go up in the future. And then if we believe that my income level will go down, a lot of retirees, think, okay, with my income, my wage is turning off, my income should go down. Then a Roth would be the advantage. However, there's an argument you could make that says, okay, taxes could go down, right? It might not be feasible, but it could happen. And my income level could go up, right? Some people, believe it or not, with their pensions and Social Securities and RMDs, have a very similar income in retirement that they may have had during their working years. And if that's the case, then believe it or not, you could actually end up having a traditional IRA be more advantageous to you. All right. So there's different, nuances here as far as kind of traditional IRA versus Roth IRA and when they might work or not work. As far as the conversation that we want to kind of move into, it's more of a conversation on whether or not a Roth conversion works, because our audience today is, mostly our clients that are in that retirement window. So let's talk about Roth conversion. So here in a Roth conversion, we're going to say we've established a traditional IRA with our principal that is pre-tax and our gains that are pre-tax. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say, what if we kind of establish this little exit strategy? And on this side, we're going to draw a Roth IRA. And in that Roth IRA, we're going to say some of this money we're going to bring down and put into this after-tax principal. And as it grows, those gains are going to grow tax-free. But some of the money is going to come out, and we are going to pay ordinary income on the portion that we take out. So if I take $100,000 out of my traditional IRA to convert it into a Roth IRA, I will have to report that year ordinary income of additional $100,000. Now I have options, right? I can pay the tax out of the conversion, which would require I have to pay tax on the portion I use to pay tax, starting to feel like a vicious loop. Or I can pay the tax due with other saved monies. Anybody have any kind of sense on which is a more advantageous way to do that?
I can chime in on that, Paul. I like to have the money outside of the Roth, because outside of the IRA, to pay taxes for the reason that you stated. It becomes circular, where you're converting more money to pay the taxes, but by virtue of converting more money, you pay more taxes. And so I do have a clear preference there.
Yeah, I would agree. Anybody else?
Yeah, I I totally agree with that. Where it's an option, it is, in my opinion, much more preferable to go that route that Scott just barely said. It just seems to make way more sense in the long run and the short run too. It kind of checks both boxes there.
Yeah.
And I think, that being said, there are certain instances where, hey, it's still, probably makes sense to do that. So that's not necessarily a deal breaker, but if there's abundant cash on hand, I think that's the clear preference.
Yeah, agreed. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about, maybe some of the funding limits that we're up against when we talk about these, in a Roth IRA, whether we're going into it through a conversion or we're going into it through, our regular ordinary income that we're earning in our wages.
Yeah, Paul, I jump in here on this. So when we're looking at this Roth conversion aspect right now, when it comes to converting to a Roth, there is no limitation. It just obviously means more taxes if you convert more money. But if we're looking at a pure Roth conversion, there is no limitation on how much you can do. It just is how much your tax situation makes sense for you to convert over to Roth. Now, if you are making regular Roth IRA contributions, then it's the normal contributions that you can make. So if you're under 50, it's $7,000. If you're over 50, you get the catch-up provision of an extra $1,000, so a total of $8,000, which is the same for traditional IRA limits as well. If you participate in a Roth through a 401k plan, then you get the advantages of being able to contribute more, which is under 50, 23,000. If you're over 50, then you can have the catch-up of an extra 7,500 for 30,500. Now, one of the caveats while we're kind of on this subject, Paul, that you mentioned earlier is that tax-free growth perspective. That's the whole purpose of this Roth conversation, is that long-term you get that tax-free growth, which is awesome. However, the tax code does put some parameters around that, and we have to satisfy a couple things before we can totally check that box. So there is what is called the 5-year rule that's been put out there to make sure that people are using this money appropriately. If we zoom out and we look at any of this retirement money, the goal from a long-term perspective is to have this for retirement and into retirement and whatnot. So there's a couple parameters with the 5-year rule. You have to be able to access your earnings or your growth tax-free. You have to be over age 59 and a half, and you have to abide by this 5-year rule. So what is the 5-year rule? To sum it up, when you're making Roth IRA contributions, the 5-year rule starts from the first contribution that you make. So when you make that first contribution, it starts the clock for 5 years, and you need to satisfy those 5 tax years before you can pull out those earnings to be tax-free. Now,
are there opportunities, Mace, to access principal before the 5 years?
Yeah, really good question. Short answer is yes, you can, because you pay the taxes up front. Like you just barely mentioned in your diagram with the Roth conversion, you pay those taxes up front, and so you can access your principal. But if you access your earnings, that's where you can be subject to taxes before the five years are up. Now, the virtue with a Roth IRA is when you make those contributions to a Roth IRA, that money or that 5-year clock starts right away. And once you've satisfied that with those first contributions, you're good. Now, when it comes to a Roth conversion, each conversion that you do has its own 5-year clock or window. And so with Roth conversions, it's a little bit different, and you have to satisfy each 5-year window for each conversion that you do. So if you're going to do 5 conversions over the next 5 years, you're going to have 5-year windows for each.
And does the same rule apply in that if I do a conversion in year 1, I know I have 5 years on the gains, but do I have access to the principal?
Yeah, you can access the principal as well, since once again you've already paid the tax up front. So you can access that principal, and when it comes to those gains, of course you still have to satisfy both the areas. You need to be over 59.5, and you need to satisfy the 5-year window. But the principal you can access tax free because you've already paid the taxes.
I'll jump in here. So one other consideration we get sometimes from clients is they'll come in and say, do I make too much money, or is my income in a range where I can contribute to a Roth IRA? And for some people, the answer is they make too much money. So for example, if you're married filing jointly on your tax return and your income exceeds the phase out range of 230 to 240,000 modified adjusted gross income, then you make too much money to make a direct Roth IRA contribution. And so these rules apply to Roth IRAs, and there's different rules that apply to retirement plan contributions. But with Roth IRAs, there's phase out rules. And so one of the strategies we look at sometimes with clients is an idea or strategy called the backdoor Roth. Now, the idea here is that you are still eligible, regardless of your income, to make a traditional IRA contribution. Now, there's some deductibility phase outs for traditional IRAs, but regardless of income, you can fund a traditional IRA. Now, an individual can fund that traditional IRA using a deductible or a non-deductible contribution, and then convert that balance over to a Roth. So once again, there's a difference between a contribution and a conversion, right? So conversion is the amount swept from a traditional over to a Roth. And then from that point, the money in the Roth would grow tax-free. So this could be a strategy to take into consideration if you exceed your Roth IRA contribution income limits, is you could look at the backdoor Roth strategy. Now, just like everything in finance, there's nuances to this. Can be some complications or things to think through, such as, was my initial contribution into the traditional IRA deductible or non-deductible? At the time of conversion, were there other IRA balances out there? If there were other IRA balances out there at the time of conversion, that can complicate from a tax standpoint. And there's an IRA aggregation rule that could mean that some of that money that's converted is taxable. This is where it kind of gets into the deep end of the pool. That's why it's important to really think through a strategy like that ahead of time and build out a game plan so you know what you're getting into. But that could be an approach that someone takes who says, hey, I'm a high income earner, but I'd still like to fund a Roth IRA.
Yeah, because one of the considerations I think a lot of people don't appreciate is what you just said, the aggregation rules the IRS has regarding how much money we can even put into pre-tax investments. If we have an employer-sponsored plan and our spouse has an employer-sponsored plan and we're trying to do a traditional IRA outside of those employer-sponsored plans so we might use it for a backdoor, we have to be very careful that we are over-contributing into pre-tax investable assets.
And as we've been talking about this, we've identified 4 different ways to get money into a Roth, right? One through an employer-sponsored plan, one through just regular contributions, one through conversion, and then one through a backdoor Roth. And so there's a fair amount of complexity here, and I think that underscores what you talked about from the outset, Paul. Each person's situation is kind of nuanced and individual, and so question number 1 is a Roth contribution in some shape or form appropriate for me? And if so, what's the right avenue?
And who do I talk to make sure I'm following the rules,
right,
and don't step on a landmine unintentionally?
Yep.
Yeah, because there are a ton of rules out there that are layered into each of these, not only the thought process behind it of what makes sense, but just those rules too.
Yeah.
And with the complexity we've covered, I think maybe, adding another layer of complexity, we also have to think about the impact on government benefits like Medicare and Social Security. If you contribute a bunch to a Roth and it pushes your income higher, that can increase your Medicare premiums. And it's something called IRMA. And what that is the adjustment to your Medicare premiums based on how much money you make. And it can be as low as 174 a month and as high as 594 a month, depending on where your income level is. So that's a consideration as well. The other thing is if your income pushes your what's called provisional income to a high enough level, your Social Security can be taxed at a higher level as well. So that's another kind of layer of complexity and another consideration when you make a Roth conversion or pursue some of these other strategies.
Absolutely. I mean, we see this all the time where somebody will get stuck paying their Medicare premiums, Part B premiums at $1,200, by the time they have both spouses, and they say, well, what happened here? How am I getting such a high Medicare premium? And it's, well, we did a Roth conversion, and so there has to be a clear understanding of what the other potential costs are. But on the backside of that, if there's been a successful Roth conversion strategy that's been implemented and done, following all the correct rules and planning, on the backside of that, those Roth dollars are tax-free, which could allow you to have a pretty high standard of living when you're through with all this, and not have a significant Medicare premium, and potentially reduce your Social Security tax to very low levels.
Yeah.
So let's talk through maybe a couple case studies that when we think through kind of when things would be good, when things might not be so good. I've just one that I thought was an interesting experience where I was visiting with an individual, and there was a sizable amount of money in a Roth account, but that money was actually in a bank environment in a Roth. And at the time, interest rates were obviously very, very low, and there's virtually no earnings on this money. And when I questioned the individual why was that money sitting in that kind of bank environment? It's all Roth money. The response was that the Roth money is too precious to lose. The Roth money was too precious to put at risk. It's all tax free, so I don't want to put any of it at risk. And I had to explain there is no benefit to a Roth unless it's growing, because a Roth is only beneficial in the sense that all of its gains are tax free, because all the contributions we made, we already paid the taxes on. So money that we did a conversion on, paid the taxes, and park in a bank account is no different than money we already had sitting in a bank account, right? So that's one scenario where people kind of needed to rethink the idea of what a Roth value would be. It's, you need that money to be appropriately growing, so that all those gains are tax free for you in the future.
Yeah, Paul, I'll jump in. So, that's an interesting point. And in some cases, it could make sense to look at someone's portfolio and say, if there's one area where we're going to take more risk or swing for the fences, so to speak, do it in the area where you're not going to pay any taxes on it, right? And so, yeah, to your point, a Roth could be a potential area where you maybe are a little more aggressive than other areas of the portfolio. Sometimes we also come across clients who say, hey, I'm a early retiree and I've amassed a large amount of qualified or pre-tax investments. And knowing that down the road, they're eventually going to have to take required minimum distributions, depending on their birth year at 73 or 75 years old. You do the math, and when they turn 75 years old, they're going to be forced to pull out a required minimum distribution based off of their pre-tax IRA balance. And that amount is big and sizable. And some people look at the amounts that they're potentially going to have to pull out and say, there's no way. I don't want to have to pull out hundreds of thousands of dollars or big dollar amounts in 1 year. There can be some strategy in potentially saying maybe we look at Roth conversions leading up to that and reduce the amount that you're forced to take out once you reach those ages.
I like that a lot, Chad, and we see this with some regularity where someone might have $100,000 in pension income, and combined $70,000 or $60,000 in Social Security income, and they're somewhat modest spenders. They live on $80,000 a year, and they've amassed enough pre-tax money where their required minimum distributions are going to be $200,000 a year. And when all of those income sources are added up in addition to the RMD, and if the thesis is correct about tax rates going up, that's not a rosy tax scenario that they're looking down the barrel of.
Yeah, I mean, it just complicates the issue we talked about, where now they're having Medicare premiums significantly higher, and Social Security tax is reaching its highest points. And meanwhile, a lot of these people will have like gifting notions where they're saying, "Hey, I'd love to be able to gift some of this to my legacy for my heirs," and they're just paying tax through the nose long before they ever pass away. So there could be some reasons there why they might look at, before they get to that point, a Roth conversion strategy.
And on that note, Paul, I mean, we do have situations where maybe someone's past the kind of quote normal like Roth conversion age. Maybe they are a little bit older, but they have a concerted desire to really minimize taxes for their heirs. And we have situations where folks have looked at that and said, "Hey, I really have a view that taxes are going to be significantly higher, and I really don't want this to be too onerous for my heirs when they inherit." And so they'll do a Roth conversion on that premise.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense.
On the other side of that, though, we also have the situations where there's the idea, that thesis, once again, that taxes are going up in the future. So there's situations where some people will say, "Hey, I have to do a Roth conversion." But we might look at the situation and say, "Hey, there may not be larger RMDs. There might not be larger spending needs. And to do a Roth conversion is actually going to unnecessarily have you pay taxes, which might not make sense, if some of the other things don't check the boxes." So there are situations, plenty of them, where it actually doesn't make sense to do a Roth conversion, even though there is pre-tax money there.
Well, and I think, Mason, that's a really good point. I think there's actually danger in sometimes putting, kind of leaning too heavy into a strategy that we don't know what the government's going to do with the rules and regs 10 years from now. So if we sometimes lean too heavy into a strategy, and we kind of put all our planning around a model, I mean, look at the Secure Act 2.0 and how it completely altered the way required minimum distributions were going to come out. Yeah. And I mean, there are people that aren't even going to be forced to take RMDs given certain income levels and the amounts that are in their IRAs. And some of those people, maybe 10 years earlier, were thinking, "I got to do a Roth conversion," and for them that would have been less optimal, right? Then, because the rules and regs were evolving and changing slightly. So I think that's actually a really good point. Is we need to be cautious and not think, "Hey, let's lean too heavy into something that may not be advantageous to us given the way the landscape evolves."
I think along those lines too, Mason, I think sometimes there's assumption, hey, if tax rates are going to go up, all tax brackets are going to rise uniformly. And that may or may not be the case. You might have higher wage earners or higher reported income gets disproportionately hit with future tax increases. And if one is in a position where it's more, a median tax bracket, the impact to that might not be as significant. So I think we need to be careful with our assumptions there, because in my view, not all of those brackets necessarily move kind of in lockstep.
My two takeaways from the conversation, that I want to make sure everybody understands. One, if you're going to do a Roth conversion, you do need to make sure you're using investments that grow, right? Because that's the only real advantage to that benefit, is it's going to grow. And for me, the second one is you got to give yourself time, because there's a runway there that you are going to prepay tax, hoping that the growth of that investment over time is going to compound far enough that it's going to be a larger return for you or your heirs than the prepaid tax that you paid, to get into that thing.
Yep.
Anybody else have any great takeaways as we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think big takeaway is, a Roth can be a powerful tool. And when properly incorporated to a financial plan, you can use it to navigate tax rates or tax brackets in retirement. And there are many other advantages. Like we talked about, you can pull some principal or contributions out if needed, if you find yourself in a bind. it's a powerful tool. All this is complex, and so I think sitting down and thinking through the nuances of how does this fit into my bigger picture with Social Security or pensions or pre-tax money is important, and this is where good planning really comes into play.
Yeah, I don't think we can underscore that enough, right? The idea that it's a tool like a hammer or a screwdriver. It's certainly not the end all be all. Like if I try to build a shed with nothing but a screwdriver, I'm probably going to find myself, in a hard situation as I'm trying to use the back handle of a screwdriver to drive a nail in, right? So it's a tool. It should be used in connection with other tools, and ultimately, quite a bit of planning that needs to go into that as we kind of think through what your ultimate retirement goals are going to look like. And I just want to close with one last thought, and that is, once again, you need to talk to your individual advisor about your unique situation, and refer to your tax professional and your CPA about these tax implications as well. The four of us are investment advisors. We are not tax professionals, so we want to ensure that everyone has that opportunity as they think through these things to consult with their professionals. So we sure appreciate everyone that joined us today for today's call, and it's a ton of fun for us to do what we do. I mean, we all kind of geek out a little bit on some of the the funny nuances of planning, but at the end of the day, what we really enjoy more than anything is our clients and the opportunity to take care of them as they go through retirement and some of these situations where they get stuck and they think, oh, this is scary, and they have an opportunity to sit down with our team, and we kind of help diffuse some of that fear and introduce some planning concepts to them that kind of solve problems and allows them some long-term peace. And so we appreciate everyone on the call with us today, and until next month, take care, everybody.